I compliment Coach McDermott and the Buffalo Bills for victory in a hard-fought game. I appreciate the efforts of our guys in there. I just told them that, but efforts don't get it done.
Anyone?
Mike, you have a year left on your contract.
Good afternoon. In a little better mood today, man. Anybody got any contract questions? I'll say this. I certainly could have handled that situation better than I did, but I'll also say this. I just believe there's a time and place for everything, and post-game press conferences are probably not the place to address contract issues and things of that nature. It's just a very individual thing, and on game day, I doubt any of us are in that mindset. Certainly I am not.
And there you heard Coach Mike Tomlin as the 2023 Pittsburgh Steelers campaign officially ended as of last week. Certainly there was raised concerns as the Steelers went into their slump beginning of December, losing 3 in a row to the Cardinals, Patriots, and Colts. A lot of whispers were a little concerning right there in media, and a lot of fans in Pittsburgh, as well as Steelers fans, mixed crowd, calling for Tomlin to step away, possibly questioning if the Steelers will agree to mutually part ways. But as you just heard at the end of the press conference, following a tough loss right there, he pretty much walked out of frustration after hearing that final question. You heard Brooke Pryor right there ask last Monday. Then it came to address it in this season-ending press conference right there, and here we are right now. Good evening, I'm Charles the Prodigy Richey here on the Man of Steel podcast. You can follow me on Twitter, X, at Man of Steel CGR. I know it's been a while, schedule-wise, but just want to catch up right now. Steelers make it to the playoffs for the 34th time in their franchise history. And they go on to lose to the Buffalo Bills last week. As you heard, Mike Tomlin definitely acknowledged last Monday that he would be returning to coach Steelers to 2024, and also did make some acknowledgement as far as to them searching for an offensive coordinator outside the organization. And here's what he had to say about that. And as you can hear right there, Mike Tomlin, they did manage to confirm that Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, who actually replaced Matt Canada, who was fired during the season following the loss of the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. Right there, you saw Eddie Faulkner, who was the running backs coach, would sell the plays, while Mike Sullivan would be the play caller on game days. They did go on to finish the season, making the playoffs with help. But here we are once again. Great run by a great coach, Mike Tomlin, all the years, still never having a losing season. As he continues to go on, it's 17 straight seasons right there. As we look at Tom Landry, who has a record for 21 seasons of non-losing football. Tom was getting very close to that. I think next up will be Bill Belichick with about 19. But anyway, too, as we also took note within that press conference right there, you also see that he would also mention during his season-ending press conference, one of his biggest regrets was that former star Marquise Pouncey. He was never able to become a world champion because he is. And definitely right there, I would like to think right there, that'd be one of the biggest issues of need right there. Mason Cole, who's definitely kind of struggled as of late under Sarr. They have not been able to find that guy as of yet. But still, you gotta think that's gotta be a big thing right there for Pickett to work with as we look at it. For any quarterback, where it's Mason Rudolph, who's actually a unrestricted free agent right now at this point. Mitch Trubisky, more than likely, he's going to be cut and save some cap space. But the bigger question is right now, as we continue to remind right now, Mike Tomlin, who's doing a fantastic job with building up this team. As we heard in that season right there, you saw in 2012, that was the only season right there where they had their season cut short in the second to last week of the season, which was 2012. They lost at home to the Cincinnati Bengals right there to Andy Dalton company. The Bengals would get into the playoffs that year as a wild card team. But here's a lot of things that begs the question right now. I mean, with the Steelers going on right now, you look at right there. Like I said, I mean, they need to find a quarterback, pretty much a competitive quarterback that's going to keep them in games. That continues to be the issue right now. A lot of people would still point to a guy like Ben Roethlisberger. They kept him an extra 3 years longer than when he needed to stay. Because 2019, I mean, as you can see, even before he had the elbow injury, he was definitely struggling. And this was since the breakup of the Killer Bees, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. I mean, right there. I mean, just when he went down at that point, officially got to see how Seahawks in a home game. I mean, he seemed to have a little bit of a resurgence the following year when he did come back for the first 11 games. But then, as you saw what happened towards the end, he started becoming like a lot inaccurate at games, struggling with passes, becoming more or less mobile. As we saw right there, I mean, a lot of people will point to that moment right there. I mean, when he got his last extension back in 2019, now he did take a pay cut 2 years later, going into the final season of his career. But again, the Steelers are a team as they continue to assist. They are not going to be a tanking team. They're not going to be losing to be burying themselves for better draft positioning. And here's the bottom line right now. I mean, this is the bet that they made. I mean, Art Rooney, no surprise, is going to keep Mike Tomlin. They do plan to extend him at some point during this offseason. There's been a lot of speculation right there in point two by guys like a Mike Florio right there, as well as Pierre King, but more particularly Mike Florio. The Steelers, who usually, with coaches traditionally, who never allow a coach to go into their final season without a contract, basically like a lame duck coach. Now, the Steelers, the last extension they did give Mike Tomlin was 3 years ago, back in April, where he had a 3 year extension. Normally, what they do by giving Mike Tomlin more in particular has been usually like 2 year extensions, but he signed his extension back in 2021, which will be running through this upcoming season. I would anticipate that the Steelers would probably keep that similar formula or probably give him a 3 year extension like they did last time. And I got no reason to believe. I will say this. I mean, definitely for all that he's done, the way players respect him in that locker room, I would have no issues if he stays on for a lot more years to come. Like I said, I want people to understand this. Mike Tomlin, for what he's done in his entire coach career, pretty much all with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, as a head coach, he's definitely a very good motivator. I think he's definitely become more aggressive and like being in on the defense with calling and managing a lot of plays right there. But at the end of the day, too, the only knocks, again, in fairness, and people will look at us, national media more in particular, we hear like the Rich Eisens of the world, or anyone else, or like a Mike Florio. I mean, the thing is, what mind boggles me is like they look at Steeler fans, Steeler Nation, and the media who are critical of Mike Tomlin to point to the fact that, well, that we are a spoiled fan base, a spoiled organization. That how dare we point to a guy who hasn't won a playoff game going on 8 years now? It'll be 8 years through next year instead of 7. That's one thing. And then two, I mean, how he manages to keep us alive in the season. Every week, every final week of all the seasons he's coached, with the exception of 2012, as I just mentioned to start off the show, was the only time that they were not in contention in the final week of the season. But I do feel like it is fair to criticize, like I said, him, allowing his defense to give up 40 points a game since their last playoff win versus Chiefs. They've been 0-5 since that point, beginning with they lost to the Patriots in the AFC Conference Championship game in 2016. Then went on to lose another 4 more games. So 0-5 basically giving up 40 points a game. And it's the longest playoff losing drought in their franchise history. I think it is fair to hold someone's feet to the fire and find out and question that what you're doing is it's basically like I always said. I've been saying this for the last 3 years. Mike Tomlin for this team, he has become a more polished up version of a Marvin Lewis. I dare argue one of his predecessors who he worked under, Tony Dungy. Either one of those two, where he's become a great regular season coach, but has been coming up short in the playoffs. You have to find a win in the playoffs. Now, again, I'm willing to give a little bit more slack on the leash that he has not had a big time quarterback to compete with today's offense since Ben Roethlisberger. And I'm talking about the Ben Roethlisberger before he injured his elbow and when he was with the Killer Bees. Let's just call it what it is. I'm willing to grant that right now. And for a guy like Kenny Pickett, whose future is still in limbo right there. I mean, listen, he has still acknowledged that Kenny Pickett will be the top quarterback in their depth chart, but there will be some competition with him as they attempt to re-sign Mason Rudolph, who will be going into this offseason as a unrestricted free agent. And you got to beg the question right now, will they consider looking at a veteran quarterback to bring in from the outside, since they're not going to be in position to draft for a quarterback in a recent high spot for right now? And I tell you what, right now, I think you definitely have to make that move. You have to make that ballsy move right now, where you have to consider trading for one or sign one in free agency. Obviously, right now, as we look at, they're going to be as we look in this year's draft right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. As we look at, they'll be selecting 20th overall in the first round. And they'll be having 7 draft picks as to date right now. So we'll see what can happen. It's still not beyond our reach. Can they move up 10 spots in the draft like they did 5 years ago under Kevin Colbert? But for right now, listen, after all this is said and done, I also don't want to be looked at as a fool, or this organization be looked foolish either. Or yes, we can always talk about how they haven't won a playoff game in 7 years, going on 8 years now. That is definitely warranted right there to criticize him for. And you do need a top quarterback to compete. I understand that. But at the same time, too, do we want to be looked at someone like an organization like, say, like the great Chicago Bulls under Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan's championship dynasty right there? We're not a championship dynasty right now under Mike Tomlin, but at the same time, all the years of competitiveness, or do you want to like disrupt and spoil something to an end? Do you want to don't realize what you have until it's gone? Is my question. You got to be very careful with that, because a lot of people will definitely be willing to take him in a heartbeat the moment he steps down. I still believe, even if it did come to that point, I do anticipate them extending him. But even if they don't extend him, God forbid, I can see a situation where Mike Tomlin would like to take a year off from football. I know a lot of people in the national media do not feel like he's shown no signs of like not wanting to coach, not wanting to retire. But I do feel like at some point too, you heard a lot of people like Bill Walsh, and I could have sworn Bill Parcells saying that being with an organization more than 10 years is too much for any coach. where at some point your message can become stale. I mean, look at Bill Walsh with the 49ers right there. Now, when you look at a guy like Bill Walsh and his head coaching career, where his message slowly started to become stale, started shortly after they won their second Super Bowl. Okay. They were not getting past any further than the divisional round. And when you look at losing twice to the New York Giants, who actually became Super Bowl champions in '86, and then losing to the Vikings, there was 3 years where they did not even sniff the conference championship game to get a decent ticket to the Super Bowl. But remember, beginning in 1986 or '87, I want to say it was when they acquired Steve Young from Tampa Bay. A lot of that was because due to high concerns for Bill Walsh because of the back injury that he had suffered in his career, more particularly to the New York Giants. He was getting concerned that Joe Montana, he may be nearing the end sooner than what he thought. And remember, there was also a crazy report out there too, under investigation by Joe, was that he was accused of taking drugs like painkillers and stuff. But I mean, eventually too, I mean, you saw the quarterback turmoil right there, the in-house competition. Steve Young, who's been dying to like get back as a starter, who's showing a lot of promise and growth under Bill Walsh before he got further groomed under George Seifert. And of course, Mike Holmgren, who was the offense coordinator for playing years. It pretty much eventually almost divided the locker room, where their season over 35 years ago went off the rails, where Bill Walsh was switching constantly between Steve Young and Joe Montana, especially times when Joe Montana was hurt. Steve Young had to fill in for him. It almost cost them the playoffs. They almost didn't make the playoffs in 1988. There was a game where they lost to the Cardinals, and the locker room, I guess, had me, the minds right there, spoke out and wanted to find out which direction they wanted to go under Bill Walsh. They finally had Joe Montana. Now, with a guy like Mike Tomlin, you see it over the years. I mean, just the little stuff where the Steelers had to release guys like beginning more nobly with LeGarrette Blount almost 10 years ago, where he walked off like away from the team towards the end of a win on a Monday night game versus Titans. He got cut like pretty much immediately after that, I think like the next day. And what happened? They made the playoffs, won their division, lost in the first round, but Le'Veon Bell got hurt in the season finale, winning the AFC North versus the Bengals. Then you also look at probably Le'Veon Bell contract issues, who's doing within his right, trying to get a new deal and not be tagged for a second straight year. And was frustrated with the guaranteed money beyond the first year that he was getting up front, which Steelers hardly did for any player at that point in their franchise history. Him and his agent decided to take a full year off and did not come back during the season when his deadline was due to come back if he chose to. And of course, you have frustrated Antonio Brown, who blew up in practice with Ben Roethlisberger right before the Christmas holiday, did not play in the finale, did not even dress, and he was gone. And then you look at Chase Claypool over a year ago, calling out the Steelers offense for not having enough splash plays. What happened? They traded him to the Chicago Bears and they got a high second round pick, which actually argued was utilized as a extra first round pick due to the Bears finishing with the worst record, earning the number one overall pick, which they did trade out. But how? I mean, call it what you want. And then you look at this season right now, where with George Pickens right there. I mean, just having some little frustration, some outbursts, chemistry wise. It seems to be a lot more chemistry where it's like with Kenny Pickett, who's been struggling mightily, who actually showed flashes, doing good down the stretch last year, a perfect preseason, but a guy who's scared to throw under pressure, move around the pocket when need be. And not the fact too that he was also dealing with a guy who, quite frankly, was not doing enough with today's game of modernized football with today's offense and under Matt Canada, which was adding more fuel to the fire. Najee Harris was definitely calling out like how like the culture and everything in this locker room needs to change, how to run things as a successful organization. But anyway, here we are right now. And I will say, despite all this, again, Mike Tomlin, he's proven, despite all that, despite going 7-7 right there in Lucas Oil Stadium to the Colts on Saturday, December 16th, made the quarterback switch during that game. It was too little too late when they were down by 2 possessions. But Mason Rudolph did get his first start in over 2 years, beginning with the Cincinnati Bengals, beating the Seahawks in Seattle, and then winning on the road in Baltimore versus Ravens. So in that time span, they beat Jake Browning, Geno Smith, and Tyler Huntley. And by the way, the Baltimore Ravens were resting majority of their stars getting ready for the playoffs. All they just had to do was play spoiler maker. So again, as Kenny Pickett enters his 3rd year, Thomas said it's certainly a big year for him. It's a huge year for him. We'll see what happens. But here's some of the bigger tasks right now for the Steelers going into this offseason right now. Offensive coordinator.
Questions?
Mike, do you foresee either Eddie or Mike Sullivan being candidates for the offensive coordinator job?
Not at this juncture, man. I'm looking at outside candidates and lining up the pecking order there. I am appreciative of their efforts in terms of what they did for us down the stretch, but I'm looking at outside candidates at this juncture.
Which has been the NFL's 5th worst offense, 18.1 points per game over the past 3 seasons. It stretched that squandered chunks of their defensive primary stars like T.J. Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick's prime years. If the Steelers don't want to waste the rest, they'll need to hire the right coordinator. And I was looking at a guy like Paul Alexander, too. You could hear on Saturdays, usually at noon following the Bob Papiani show. Who's on at 1 Eastern. He was basically pointing out how they're right off his coordinator. And here's a list of candidates that was mentioned by 937 The Fan that was written by Jeff Hathorn right here. You look at guys like Darrell Bevell, who's worked with the Dolphins quarterback and was their pass game coordinator. 23 years with experience, 15 years being head coach, offensive coordinator with Minnesota, Seattle, Detroit, Jacksonville. Worked Tua, Matt Stafford, Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Brett Favre. And he won the Super Bowl with Seattle Seahawks, had second best NFL rushing offense in his 6 years as offense coordinator, which was over 10 years ago. Seems to have all the qualifications. Will you find the Steelers job attractive? Then you got Josh McDaniels, who's primarily known for his stint in New England. Had failed head coaching opportunities going with the Broncos and then the Raiders. Now, a lot of people point to how he had a great quarterback, the GOAT, and Tom Brady to work with, and one of the greatest coaches, and Bill Belichick. Despite the struggles without Tom Brady, still a smoke and mirror right there. I would not want him as a Steelers offensive coordinator. I'll tell you that right now. But you also look at Eric Bieniemy right now. Over 25 years as a coach and player, offense coordinator for 5 years, beginning since 2018, 2 Super Bowl titles working under Andy Reid and coaching Patrick Mahomes, while running backs Adrian Pearson, Maurice Jones-Drew previously. But only problem is with that, his desire, he wants to become a head coach who seems to continue to be blackballed as far as not getting his opportunity. So, that would be a long shot right there. I'll probably give that a 30% chance of happening. But you also got to look at Kellen Moore right there, who formerly offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys right there, who Mike McCarthy took over as play calling duty for Dak Prescott. But Kellen Moore, who's definitely struggled with an inactive Justin Herbert this year. You look at him right there. I mean, 4 years with the Cowboys, 27.7 points per game, 391 yards per game in 2022. But I mean, concern will be that the Chargers with Herbert for 13 games averaged just 20.4 points a game. And I don't know about him, but Frank Reich, I did not want him. Clint Kubiak. Now, here's a guy I think Bob Pompiani was a little high on. He worked with Kyle Shanahan as our pass game specialist. Only season as an offensive coordinator was 2021 with Minnesota, tied for first and fewest interceptions with Kirk Cousins. Now, 36-year-old previously was quarterback coach in Minnesota from 2019 to 2020, and Denver 2016 2018. Fought saw Gary Kubiak. Clinton's only one season of calling plays as offensive coordinator. Vikings averaged 25 points a game that season. Now, Byron Leftwich, who Mark Cabali has acknowledged right there that he's pretty much being ruled out as a candidate. He's heard a lot more sources close to him saying that he's definitely one of the guys that the Steelers would not entertain, despite him reaching out to the Steelers. And it's hard to say if he reached out prior to the season or during the season about their inquiries as a coordinator. But I think he would definitely be a good fit, but it's definitely a reach at this point. Then finally, you got Shane Waldron, offensive coordinator with Seattle, but head coach Pete Carroll was fired. He was the coordinator for the previous 3 years, 2 of those 3 years with Geno Smith. And he was passing game coordinator with the Rams from 2017 through 2020, won 2 Super Bowls with the Patriots as operations assistant, helped Geno Smith become comeback season in 2022. And the 44-year-old has had a few years of play calling experience with moderate success. But I tell you what, the one guy who I do like on this list, I think I will go with Darrell Bevell, the very first name on this list. I'm just considering the guys he's worked with: Tua, Stafford, Wilson, Lawrence, Favre. I know he's up in age, but at the same time, too, if you want to like talk, or you still got an oldie but a goodie, but a guy who could still translate into this game about scoring points and yards production, I think that's a guy they should target right there. That'd be my guy for offense coordinator. Now let's go ahead and get into like some of the interesting notes too. The Steelers would have to be making some decisions too when we look at. We already discussed the offensive coordinator right now. Quarterback room, again, Kenny Pickett will continue to be the top guy, but will have some competition to earn his job, earn his stay right now. Definitely a guy who's been frustrated, who's been assured. I mean, according to his case, if he wasn't injured and he was medically cleared and did enough, that he would be dressed and ready to play, arguably as a starter. But Mike Tomlin didn't feel like he had enough reps. And then you also look at right now, Mason Rudolph, will he be able to bring him back? That's a big question mark. But again, I still think Mason Rudolph is a smoking mirror. I mean, those 3 wins came against backup quarterbacks in the season finale. Now, he pretty much held his own right there versus the Buffalo Bills in the wild card loss. I was actually there last week in Buffalo, Orchard Park. Great time experience, with the exception of being stranded thanks to the travel ban. Thanks, New York governor. No, I'm just kidding. But no, all seriousness, I think in that game right there, I mean, even that loss when they were down 21 to zip at that point, I mean, he still finished passing for a net yard, passing of 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, only got sacked 1 time in that game. I mean, even still, I mean, from his QBR right there, he had 40. Not really good, but his rating was an 80. So, I mean, it just goes to show you the reality. Once again, you need top quarterback play to compete. So, I mean, verdict is still out on him. I'm not sure if I'm ready to embrace him as a full-time star for next year, despite the momentum. I got to see more of him coming back out of this, because I will say this. I mean, Mason Rudolph, for his time, for what he's improved on since starting since 2021, this year alone, he's been 3-0, completing 75% of his passes for 684 net yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He took care of the ball. He's only been sacked 5 times for 32 yards right there. But again, against backup quarterbacks, that's the only thing I would caution Steeler Nation right there. Continue to drink the Kool-Aid of Mason Rudolph. Now, here's another decision right now. Cam Hayward right now, who's going to be entering the final year of his deal that he signed back in 2020, his extension. Steelers are set to expend $142.2 million on defense next year, the second most in the league per over the cap. More than half of that, 74.2 million, and 30.2% of the team's total payroll is eaten up by 3 players. Watt over 30.4 million, Hayward 22.4, and Fitzpatrick 21.4 million. Now remember, Hayward, he did injure his groin, tore it off the bone week 1, and tried to rush back, turning his projected 12-week recovery into a 6-week process. Quality of his play inevitably took a step back because he played through pain. But those are going to be the keyest decisions right there. More particularly, I think the quarterback and the offensive coordinator, those would be a huge offseason. Those would be the main 2 things. Like I said, my guy for offensive coordinator, I like the guy who worked with Tua, Wilson. I like Darrell Bevell. I would bring him in if I had my choice right there. Let's go ahead and finish this up, too. So we get closer. We're only about, right now, a little over, before the Super Bowl, 3 weeks away from the NFL awards ceremony right now. You look at, like, the odds right now, more particularly as it relates to the Steelers right now, according to Vegas Insider, the odds for Defensive Player of the Year. T.J. Watt, he is 3rd on that list as a favorite to win that. As we look at Vegas Insider right now, T.J. Watt for Defensive Player of the Year for that award, he's at plus 400. He is first in sacks with 19 and first quarterback hits with 36. While Myles Garrett, he leads the way at minus 200 defensive end for the Browns. And you also got linebacker Micah Parsons of the Cowboys, who plays outside and inside. If I want to say inside mainly as of late, he's plus 300. You also got Raiders defensive end Max Crosby, 49ers defensive end Nick Bosa, and lastly, 6 Roquan Smith at plus 10,000 right there. Right now, I'm gonna tell you what. Right now, I think T.J. Watt, I'd choose him, but I can honestly see where they could give it to Myles Garrett. I wouldn't have too much of a problem with that. They did have a Super Bowl quality defense. I will say this: for the team I was disappointed in the most so far throughout this playoffs, who did not make a legitimate run and should have, were the Cleveland Browns. I know the Browns are still get that rib, the Browns being the Browns, but man, it's just this point. I thought Joe Flacco could have a magical season right here. He had an opportunity to become the 3rd quarterback to win a Super Bowl with another franchise. And if he would have done that, won Super Bowl MVP, you can make his case for a Hall of Fame legacy right there. I put him on the level of Eli Manning. That did not happen, but again, that's where we are right there. And then I think right now for MVP, you gotta give it to Lamar Jackson. Just think about this storyline right now. For a guy who finally got his new deal, his guaranteed money, who's been much happier playing. When you look at with everything that's been going on right now. Under offense coordinator, back-to-back champion of the Georgia Bulldogs, Tom Monken right there. You look at him right there. They are 4th in points overall at 483, 6th in yards. And just done a phenomenal job on continuing to keep the rushing game. No surprise there, but he's made Lamar Jackson a better pocket passer right now. In his career, up to this point. 24 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, probably like his best ratio ever at this point, outside of his MVP year where he had 36-6. But anyway, a team who I thought were on the ropes going to the halftime versus Texas in the divisional round, definitely shut them out the rest of the way and gradually put that game away and getting real stronger as Super Bowl favorites. But I'll tell you what, right now, the Chiefs, who had their first road game under Patrick Mahomes, I guess there's just certain stars you don't bet against. That Chiefs Ravens game in M&T Bank Stadium at 3 Eastern on CBS. I think that's an AFC Championship game that a lot of football fans have been dreaming to see, especially the owners and executives. That'd be a great one. Then also for the NFC Conference Championship game, 49ers just squeaked by the Packers. Packers, who I really thought lost that game. 49ers who will be hosting the Detroit Lions right there. That's going to be a good matchup as well. So you're going to have a good Final Four. But Super Bowl prediction, I'm going to go with the Chiefs versus Niners. You'll have a Super Bowl rematch of 54. I'm not sure if the Lions will have enough. I think they'll definitely give the 49ers some fits, but that's about it. And that's going to do it for this edition here of the Man of Steel podcast. Like I said, sorry if I've been active for a while, but just been going through a lot of tough decisions as of late, adjusting my schedule. But I will try to be back on track. Once again, you can follow me on Twitter X at Man of Steel CGR and on Instagram at Man of Steel Nation. And like I said, just be careful what you wish for the people who want Mike Tomlin gone. I have been definitely one of his highest critics. But again, I love this guy. I don't want to see him go. But I mean, at some point, too, if you're forced into a corner where you still keep doing the same routine, where you're good enough to do a great regular season finish, if they make it to the playoffs, you continue to lose miserably in the playoffs, at some point, you're going to have to make a tough decision. They'll never fire this guy, but you may have to have a hot conversation where things get uncomfortable, where they may have to agree to mutually part ways. But again, this job is here as long as he wants it. Sometimes in life, you can't always listen to what people are advising you what's in your best interest. Sometimes you gotta make the ballsy decisions. And if you feel like you gotta make that big sacrifice, you can't live in your fears, as like Mike Tomlin would say. And I think that the Steelers would have to feel a similar way. I doubt that's gonna happen, but again, uh continue to coach us up, Coach T. Really love you. Don't go anywhere. But again, until we get closer, I'll try and keep along as we get closer to like the combine coming up and the NFL draft and much more as we get ready for the 2024 campaign season. As always, leader, don't be trolling, be rolling. Here we go, series. Here we go. I gone. Thank you for watching the Meta Steel podcast with your host, Charles Prodigy Richey, here on YouTube. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And for all the latest Meta Steel podcast episodes, feel free to download them on Mixcloud, Anchor.fm, and SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts.